Hello, everyone. Welcome to interactive crisis communications war game. Can you save your reputation? A partnership between Signal AI and the British Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for giving up your Thursday or Wednesday lunchtime, especially end of the month, to join us. We're very excited to be running this event. So, quick introduction to myself. My name is Ed Riley. I work for Signal AI over here in APAC, based in Hong Kong. Signal AI delivers solutions that solve business issues for communications teams by helping support strategic, reputational management, and ultimately better decision making. I also, as part of that, sit on the Marketing and Comms Committee for the British Chamber of Singapore and Hong Kong. So it's wonderful to be working with the committee to produce this event today. A little bit more about the committee. The Marketing Communications Committee exists to keep British Chamber members and the broader business community in Singapore updated with the latest research, trends, and technology in the Marcomms sector, to promote industry best practice and showcase the individual capabilities of members via chamber initiatives and through the development of its own events, seminars, and shareable content. The event today, we've invented a crisis simulation using video and scenario choices that will keep you on your toes. When crisis strikes, it is time for public relations and communication professionals to shine. But are you prepared to respond at a moment's notice? Navigate your way through a media crisis and find out if you have what it takes to survive. I've already introduced myself. I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker for later, Eleanor Tan, who's Global Head Corporate Communications at the China Navigation Company. Eleanor is currently working for a shipping company which turned 150 years old this year. And in this newly created role, she leads both external and internal communications, which covers 2,500 global employees, including 1,600 seafarers. She spent 7 years as head of APAC communications for Wiley, a 210-year-old global publisher. Her remit covered 14 APAC offices and territories, and she was actively involved in change and internal communications with Wiley's largest restructuring exercise, which impacted 15% of the global workforce. On top of that, Eleanor was also the British Council's first Director of Communications in Singapore, a post she held for 6 years. During her tenure, she successfully built up an impactful media relations and stakeholder engagement program, reversing negative media and public sentiment about the UK and UK education, whilst building up admiration and respect for UK science and art endeavours. Eleanor, welcome.
Thank you very much. Although I should say that Cienco, the company that I'm working for right now, will turn 150 next year, actually. So right now we are busy planning for that. But looking forward to this session today with everyone.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Anna, and we'll cover that 100 so many years, as well as another great crisis that you've been involved in over the last 2 weeks later on. Looking forward to that. So thank you. Great. So guys, we will move on to the war game itself. Let me share my screen and we will take it from there. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. So the idea of this, let me run you through it. So the game itself, the scenario outlines a series of events throughout the crisis. Your role as head of communications is to advise and ultimately take responsibility for the cadence and tone of messaging put out by your organization. You'll have to make decisions and will have consequences as time unfolds. The consequences take the form of points. You start with 10 reputational points, and further points can be won or lost. So start with 10. The events in the simulation have been exaggerated, and at times the twists are unfair, but it's impossible to create an engaging war game without slightly magnifying reality. The real objective of this exercise is to get you thinking, talking with your peers, and hopefully sharing thoughts on the labyrinth of decisions that can unfold during a crisis. So that's the concept of the game. How it works: during each event within the crisis, you'll be provided with options which will come up on the screen, and you'll have a few minutes to make a decision on the best course of action. But be warned, you can't control the flow of events, and what seems like a good decision now might very quickly become a bad one, depending on how things pan out. No one can predict the future, so you'll have to do your best. Okay, And with that, I will start. Okay, day one, discovering the hack. Just to go over that scenario, you are the head of communications for Guzon, one of the largest tech firms in the US. You wake up on Monday morning and see a text message asking you to join an urgent meeting with the C-suite. You open your email and check your daily alert from Signal. There is nothing out of the ordinary. You join the meeting and the CTO leads. She announces there's been a hack on Guzan systems and it looks like data has been stolen. It's not yet clear what has gone or how sensitive it is. The chief legal counsel then adds that the regulator must be informed within the next 2 weeks, but there's no obligation to do anything at this time. The CEO is troubled. She's seen firms put through the grinder on this issue in the past and knows it can be tricky to handle. She turns to you. How should we best manage this crisis, she asks. You're the communication specialist, as this is your show. You need to guide us through this and minimize the company's reputational damage. That's what we pay you for. The implicit assumption is that you had better get it right, or else. So, decision point one, how will you respond? Option A, be honest about the ambiguity, what you know and what you don't. A transparent, open approach might play well with the journalists, but it might scare the public, and the lawyers will go insane. It'll almost certainly raise the profile of the story, and there's nothing wrong with good press, but regulators might feel they have to act in a heavy-handed manner. Option B, remain tight-lipped. Treat it as a very technical issue and downplay what has happened. You'll slip into a wider release and simply say you're taking the necessary steps without going into detail. It'll be legally safer in the short term and you might get away with it, but the press will hate it if they feel you're going to pull the wool over their eyes. So option A, be honest. Option B, remain tight-lipped. 7 seconds remaining. Please add your answer to the poll. Okay, hope that all worked for everyone okay and you managed to use the poll. Interesting. So 71% of us decided to be honest and 29% decided to remain tight-lipped for now. Okay. Fantastic. Decision point two. You picked your line and now you need to flesh it out a bit. Option A, say sorry. And that Guzan will do everything it can to fix the problem. Option B, announce an investigation through all legal avenues and say a crime has been committed against you. Or option C, say you're internally investigating the matter. So again, option A, say sorry, that Guzan will be doing everything it can to fix the problem. Option B, announce an investigation through all legal avenues and say a crime has been committed against you. Say you are internally investigating the matter. And just to be clear, as I pointed out at the beginning of the talk, decisions you make now can impact on points and decisions later on, of course. So, okay. Let's move that along there. So we've got 18 seconds left on that decision. Three, two, one. Journalist reaches out and shares that he's been told there's been a hack at Guzon. He talks to give you a chance to comment and control the narrative. Okay. Decision point 3. Will you keep quiet or will you go public? Option A, should the company go public with news of the hack in a show of transparency? Or option B, should you wait for more information before you make any hasty statements you can't take back? I think what's always important with this is lawyers will often point out that you should remain silent until you have all the facts, in case you get caught later on. And it may be a sound strategy. But let's be honest, you don't know all of the facts and the public might think, well, there's no smoke without fire. That being said, it's equally important to stay on the front foot. In a world awash with information, controlling it can be hard, and a hack you definitely can't control. Transparency or the appearance of it can help audience believe in your authenticity and honesty, two crucial drivers of trust and reputation. Will you decide to keep quiet or go public with the truth? Remember, decisions you make now may change your ability to respond in the future. So A, go public now, or B, wait so you have more information available. Four seconds left. Okay.
Good evening, it's 8 PM and here are the headlines. 85-year-old man forced to retire by employer sparked a debate about the state pension age. The coalition government made a decision under the 1995 Pension Act that the man cannot be forced to retire. More on this later. Scientists working off the coast of Chile have discovered porcine animals that can actually fly. Tesla have already announced an all-electric flying version of the pig. And Guzon has suffered a hack on its data. It's not known at this time the extent of the damage. We'll be talking to an employee of the company who's made the story public.
I felt I had to speak out. Data breaches are something we have to be transparent about. It's such a sensitive issue, and Guzon should lead the way.
We've spoken to Guzon, and we'll have a comment from their representatives later in the show.
Okay. Right, we're getting up to the point now for the first time where we work out whether we've won or lost any points based on our decisions we made earlier on. So this disgruntled employee has gone public. You feel your phone buzzing. It's a real-time alert from Signal AI notifying you that at least 4 broadcast outlets are running a story on Guzon. A whistleblower has gone public with a story. Now, points-wise, if you decided to go public with a story early, then well done. Your press release took the wind out of the whistleblower's sails. It ensured you limited the damage while keeping a handle on the narrative. You just got 2 reputation points. So if you're on 10 before, you'll move on to 12, of course. Conversely, if you decide to hold off, then your side of the story didn't get heard and the press has a field day. The article, "Big Tech Company Gets Hacked and Won't Admit It," was shared over 150,000 times in just a few hours. You scrambled to get your release out. Thank God you prepped it, but the damage was done. So depending on how you answer decision point 3, you can either give yourself 2 or -2 reputation points there. Okay, we move on. So this screen here is just to show you quickly how the public, through articles, the perception is of Guzon at the moment. So you can see that currently, as the status quo is, it's 50% of the public are reading sentiments from articles as negative, whereas about a quarter is positive and another quarter is neutral. So that's the tone of the conversation at the moment. You can see the articles there on the right-hand side, painting that picture on positive or negative. Okay. Decision point 4. key spokesperson. Now the story is out there. You'll need to organise a press tour to settle the waters and take control of the narrative. You've decided to put a spokesperson up for key interviews with Fox News and CNN. But who you choose to be the key spokesperson can define what people take away. Having different speakers and point people in front of the press comes with its own problems and risks. You now know a little bit more about the hack. It was of just 1,500 people, so 1,500 people hacked, and it was credit card data, but it remained heavily encrypted. So not great, but not terrible either. So just to repeat that, it was 1,500 people or clients have been hacked, and it was credit card data, but it remained heavily encrypted. So who do you put in front of the world media? Option A, your CTO. Your CTO is very technical. They're good when explaining complicated problems, but in a complicated way. They're very honest and struggle to give shorter answers. They have no media training, so they may say the wrong thing without meaning to, and aren't always able to stay on message. Option B, your CEO. Your CEO is media trained and she's able to sympathize authentically with audiences and connect the company to the man in the street. She's not technical, which for a big tech company has been a challenge, and the press know about it and have used this as a tactic to unsettle her in the past. Option C, your press team. It's the safest option. A prepared statement can be vetted by lawyers and CEOs alike and lets you control exactly what is going to be said. However, it's also a sign that you're not taking it very seriously. If your leadership can't be bothered to come out, are you really engaging with the issue? So option A, CTO, option B, CEO, option C, press team rather. Who are you putting in front of the world media? The likes of Fox News, CNN, Channel News Asia, Bloomberg Daybreak, all those sorts of ones there. Okay, just 17 seconds left on that choice. Okay, interestingly, huge majority have put the CEO in front, 78%. Fantastic. Very interesting. Okay, so whilst your preferred spokesperson is in front of the media, you are asked the following question. Okay, decision point 4. The broadcast interviews went as planned. It's a big story. A lot of people use Guzon every day. Most of the questions went well. You've really done your homework and had answers well thought out in advance. But there was one real zinger of a question, and it was very technical. Regarding your security arrangements, what hashing algorithm in Guzon using for passwords? What kind of elliptic curve cryptography do you use? In the way you use passwords susceptible to a rainbow table attack. Okay, now to get some points. If you sent out your CTO, they were able to tackle it with ease. In fact, it made Guzon seem totally in control of the situation. Please add 1 reputation point to your score. If you sent out your CEO, while she was clear she didn't really have the technical knowledge, she didn't lose control. It didn't help the narrative, and it highlighted Guzon's possible lack of control of the situation. Please take away 1 reputation point if you sent out your CEO, which of course interesting is 78% of us went for that, and we'll obviously talk about that later. And finally, if you sent out the press team, you made a reasonable deflection that you didn't have the information to hand and would follow up with a statement shortly, which you did. So you get 0 points for that. So yeah, add 1 for CTO, -1 for CEO, and stay as you are if you sent out the press team. You also get a bonus point if you treated your initial release as technical and displayed the same issue, and that's option B on decision 1. So an extra point if you went for option B on decision 1. Okay, this chart here quickly shows good news. We are getting more positive results as opposed to negative at the moment. Okay.
We are anonymous. We have targeted.
Okay, so just to go back, Anonymous, take responsibility. You wake up the next morning and the story is now out there. You've released a narrative and held broadcast interviews. It's a little bit like it feels a little bit like you might get out of this one without too much trouble. You're checking your morning signal alert, and the following clip is being aired across most senior broadcast and national news websites. Okay, here we go.
We are anonymous. We have targeted Guzon for their repeated failures to address ecological concerns. They tear down the walls of our privacy in order to sell without regard for moral concerns. We have stolen this data to prove that they are at our mercy. If Guzon do not address changes in their organization, we will strike again. We will not release customer data, but their executives will face social justice. Guzon, our message is simple. Change your ways. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Okay, so the corporate disruption collective Anonymous has taken responsibility for the hack. They've released a video to the world and sent it to every news outlet. They've called out Guzon's failures to address ecological concerns in the wake of Extinction Rebellion protests. Worse still, they've used it as blackmail, and they said, if you don't change your ways, they'll come after your C-suite. On the plus side, they have said they've deleted the hacked data, but it did demonstrate what they are capable of. Okay, reputation point. If you said sorry in your first release, so decision point 2, you lose 1 reputation point. Saying sorry too early meant that you are now less able to blame others, in this case, Anonymous. Your apology was not necessary and could be perceived as an admission of guilt or fault on Guzon's part. So if you went for decision point 2, if you decide to apologize early, remove 1 reputation point from there. Okay. Decision point 5, what narrative will you follow? You'll need a narrative to counter this story over the next few weeks. It's clearly got legs, but what direction will you take it? Option A, focus on the customers affected. Focusing on the people impacted by Anonymous should win public sympathy and make Guzon appear caring. It also helps shift blame away from Guzon and onto Anonymous. Option B, focus on existing and new CSR initiatives. You could lean in and focus on your CSR and environmental work. After all, Anonymous have already brought light to the issue, and you don't have a terrible record compared to some of your competitors. It might also be a chance to turn the table on Anonymous and turn it into a positive story. Option C, focus on the law and a criminal investigation. You can always call in the big guns. A hacker collective has not only infiltrated your systems, but has openly threatened your senior staff. Bringing the police for support will certainly add a sense of security to the public perception. But is it a really good idea to let police in on company private documents? So option A, focus on the customers affected. Option B, focus on existing and new CSR initiatives. Option C, focus on the law and a criminal investigation involving the police, or if in the US, the FBI potentially. Okay. Skip this along. 6 seconds left. So 67% went for focus on the customers affected, 22% went B, focus on existing and new CR initiatives, and 11% of us went for focus on the law and a criminal investigation. Okay. On to the next. tweet from Kanye West, of all people. Okay, you press send on the first set of releases that align with your chosen narrative, and bang, you get hit with a tweet from none other than Kanye West. In classic Kanye style, he's ignored everything and gone straight for the jugular. He's placed you firmly in a terrorist narrative. The press are now banging down your door. Reputation point time. If you focused on the victims and your previous decision point, then this narrative shift is okay for you. It continues to paint you as the wronged party and will drive public sympathy, so you get 1 reputation point. If you focused on existing CSR initiatives, you now look like you've been appeasing Anonymous. Kanye also almost looks like he might be accurate for once. You lose 2 reputation points. And if you have focused on the law and a criminal investigation, you look strong. You're not negotiating, you're fighting crime. You get 2 reputation points. You get a bonus point if you involve the police in the first press release you sent out. If you involve that right at the beginning, you get an extra reputation point as well. Okay, so that should be decision point 2 rather than decision point 3 on the screen. It should have been decision point 2, option B. To get involve the police, you get all law, you get 1 extra reputation point. Okay, so that begins to wrap up the game at this stage. The next point would be a bit more interactive. Is moving on to this point here is what we'd like to do is ask the attendants if you are happy to put a tweet together. How would you respond to Kanye West's tweet? Sticking to 280 characters, what would be fantastic is if people could write this and add this to the Q&A on the box here, on the Zoom box. If you could put in your tweets into there. What we'll do is we'll have a look at those. We'll ask Eleanor a few questions, and then we'll come back to those tweets, and we will ask Eleanor to judge the best one in her opinion, and you'll get +5 points for that. Does that sound sensible, Eleanor?
Yep.
Fantastic. Do you use Twitter yourself for your company role?
No.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, let me just end the video there. So just to repeat, if everyone who's happy to could tweet a response to Kanye West in the Q&A section on the Zoom link, that would be fantastic. And while you put that together, I'll kick off the Q&A or panel discussion with Eleanor.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so let me just end that there. Okay, Eleanor, fantastic to have you on, and thanks again for sparing the time. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, such a weird quirk of fate. It's fantastic to be talking to a global head of comms from a major international shipping firm. Bear in mind what's been going on in the Suez Canal and Ever Given. Just while we've got you on that, it'd be fantastic to hear what the crisis challenges from a communications perspective that Ever Given rather has pulled up for the industry. Any insights you could give us?
Well, I think, before this, I think, people didn't know a lot about shipping, that, people didn't know that shipping was responsible for 90% of world trade, actually. So it's what I call, it's a way of bringing up visibility of shipping. And I think because of that and the scale of the incident, I mean, it made everyone around the world conscious and aware of shipping as an industry, actually. And I think, alongside there have been many press reports about supply chain disruptions, impact on shipping companies, logistics companies, like really a whole bunch of industries that are affected as well. But I think at the same time, I mean, I have to say that when the news first broke, I wondered about the seafarers on board, because I'm sure everyone on this in this seminar are probably aware that there is a global crisis about crew change. So for us as a company, last year we signed the Neptune declarations to allow seafarers to ask our peers and governments to look at allowing our seafarers to get vaccinations and for them to actually go home. So right now, I think there are 750 organizations that have signed up for this declaration, and we hope that with this crisis is even brought up the importance of seafarers in moving world trade as well. So I think that has actually given that visibility that's needed. I think on the whole, everyone's literacy of world trade and shipping and supply chains has actually gone up as well. And of course, in this day and age where social media is such a popular way of communicating, of course, you get your memes and your very creative take on what's happened in the Suez Canal as well. I think when the ship was eventually freed to move, I mean, my news feeds were flooded, with people whooping hooray, and and also among my LinkedIn friends, I mean, people who before this haven't had quite a clue about shipping actually. So it's quite heartwarming in a way, because people felt that, oh, finally we see the ship moving, and you see the role of the smaller ships like your tugboats coming in to help as well, and you see almost like integrated effort among different players in the industry to do it. So I thought that was a good communication story actually. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely on that. And I think there's other bits we can go into later on this, but we've had, I think, a couple of tweets through. Thank you to people putting that through. So if everyone could quickly, if we could quickly dive into the Q&A and have a look. We've got two here. So first of all, from Desi, first tweet at the top. Guzon takes all criminal activities seriously and is taking appropriate steps with the law authorities to ensure that our company, customers and employees are safeguarded. And the second one's from an anonymous attendee saying, this is libelous and we will sue. So quite punchy, which I enjoy.
It's tweets, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're allowed to give 5 points to either Desi or the anonymous attendee before we get back to the question. So, yeah.
So do you want me to give the points now?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Well, it has to be to Desi, right? Because, it is serious. And then, I mean, given Kanya, his personality is a bit weird. I wouldn't go for the second one actually, because I think no matter how frivolous sometimes people respond, we still have to respond appropriately and professionally. So, but for me, I would word it slightly differently. I would just say Guzon takes all criminal activities seriously, full stop. We are taking appropriate steps with the law authorities to ensure that the safety of our company, customers, and employees are safeguarded. So I think it's adding a bit more punch and saying that we are doing this, to really show how seriously that we are taking it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. And congratulations, Desi, and thank you for sending that tweet over. I don't know if everyone's feeling brave enough and they've managed to keep their scores, but if people want to post their scores in the Q&A box, that would be fantastic or very interesting. I know, so, as I pointed out at the beginning, it's all role play, and it's some people may not agree with what reputational points are awarded or taken away, but hopefully just a bit of fun and gets everyone going. I'm going to ask Eleanor a few more questions based on some of the outputs of the game, but if anyone's got any questions they would like to ask themselves, please do put those into the Q&A box, and we'll obviously put those to Eleanor over the next 15 minutes or so while we have this conversation. So, Eleanor, you obviously work for China Navigation Company, which is part of Swire, which me based up here in Hong Kong, very fond of course, and know it well. how important is it for large firms such as Swire to have a war room, if you like, for crisis communications? For things such as a data breach or national security law like we've had up here, what would you? Yeah, is it important, and do you know firms that actively use one?
Well, the thing is, I've worked for a few large companies, MNCs, and we've always had a war room. And, every half a year, we'll actually review it to see, that it's kept relevant because, there's so much change in the world right now, and you need to ensure that, it's being, you're kept on top of things, actually. So I think it's absolutely important that companies have war rooms. Right now we allude that large firms should have war rooms, but by the same token, I think smaller firms might still need to have one because nowadays boundaries are porous, right? So it doesn't, although the big MNCs could be your big targets, but at the same time, if you're a small one, but for example, if you're a service provider and you handle big clients, so that could also work against you as well, actually. And I think, with cybercrime being such a becoming prevalent, sorry. So having a war room, even if you're a smaller company or a medium-sized company, might not be a bad idea, actually. Maybe for a smaller firm, you could partner with one of your technology vendors, for example. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. And who are you having in that war room? So we talked earlier about putting the CEO, the CTO, or the press team, so say CCO, in front. Who would you pull into that? Who are the key figures you would like to see forming part of that?
Well, across the few companies that I've worked with, the usual people that are in the war rooms are your MD, your leadership, the person who will be the main spokesperson for the company, corporate comms, your press relations, as what you've mentioned, legal, finance, probably HR and ops. I think it also depends on the nature of the incident, and maybe risk and insurance, actually. But again, it really depends on the event itself. So the lead of this war room can make a decision as to who to really pull in or stand down. So it really depends on the incident, actually. But roughly, I would think it's this group of people, and it's what I've seen in other organizations as well.
Okay. That's fascinating. And I suppose part of that, of course, is media training is absolutely key for CEOs, and part of that. A couple of points. Someone's come in and put: Can you provoke the hacker to do worse? And how do you handle the initial response? One of our attendees has heard that New Zealand Stock Exchange were hacked again following their initial response, which is an interesting point. And someone's asked, Eleanor, what's your biggest crisis you have faced? Appreciate you might not be able to quote the company. I think we touched on this when we did our talk yesterday, didn't we?
Well, the thing is, I think for hackers, right, I think there could be the possibility that they want to challenge you even more, actually. That's why I think, for example, I think especially in the case of cybersecurity, some of it has to do with a judgment call, actually. So, I think that's where the experience of an experienced leader or even your IT director might be able to help in that sense as well. So it's quite difficult to really answer that completely, but I think that there is that possibility that they could do worse, actually. And whether it could be a case where you really have to get legal advice or authorities in to help you as well. Biggest crisis I have faced, there have been a number. So the thing is, I'll just quote from one of the organizations that I worked with, and indeed we had ransomware. So it happened over the weekend, and for us in Singapore, we went into work on Monday, merrily thinking that the server is down just for a couple of hours. Good, we can actually work in peace without any emails. But then gradually, as the day went on, we're like, how come no one is emailing us? And that became quite a crisis actually. And that was when the next day immediately we assembled a war room and also involved some regional leaders as well. And daily we had a call at 9 a.m. because it was an international organization. So there were things that happened, steps that were taken in the US, for example, that, when we woke up in Asia, we'll see what happened. And because our emails were affected, so we actually resorted to good old printing out statements and updates and leaving a copy of the steps taken on everyone's chair in the office. So, there's still room for pen and paper and offline methods of communications actually. So I think, what we've learned from that is that, get your war room up very quickly, keep your updates going. And our leaders also, I mean, besides the desk drops, that's what we call them, the papers on chairs and all that, we had leaders who did Q&A sessions with their teams. And, throughout the organization on the floor, you'll see different leaders briefing their teams as well. So it's really a mix of communications methods and channels that we used. So I think that was something that stayed with me, which I've also learned from as well. Okay. Funniest thing I've seen during my career in comms. Oh gosh, where should I start? Well, I mean, I think we are slightly deviating from this chat, Ed. Do you want me to take all the questions or what?
Yeah, why don't we round up with that at the end? I think what would be really interesting, and we'll definitely go back to that, is what skills, I think it's a really interesting question, either the skills that you've picked up or skills that you've hopefully naturally got that come with the role. So what skills do you need to succeed in this crisis comms related industry?
Resilience. Because the thing is, well, in comms, things change very quickly. And the thing is, one of my ex-bosses always says, you plan to unplan. I mean, it's like there are days that I think, okay, today I'm going to do this A, B, C, D, E. And then, I get press contacting me about something. And sometimes, it could be 2-3 queries, you see, and it's about getting the information in for the media and structuring the answers as well actually. So I think resilience is there, and adaptability, and I think not quite a skill, but I think a good sense of humor might help because sometimes it does get quite stressful actually. But I think overall, I think the spirit of learning and curiosity is important, not just for comms, but I think for us in the working world actually, because there's just so much that we don't know. But at the same time, with the internet now, there's always of finding out information actually. So I think those are skills that I think could be needed. Of course, as a basic for a comms person, you need to be able to write well, to be able to communicate well actually, because that's our bread and butter, right? That we need to be able to communicate well. Yeah. Do I look forward to the next crisis? Not really. I think it's rather, I think I'll rephrase it to, are you prepared for the next crisis? I think, for us in communications and crisis communications, I think it's to be as prepared as we can actually, because, crises are not quite the same from one to the other, even though there might be the broad category of cybercrime or something like that, but there are all sorts of crises around, and we need to be flexible to be able to respond to them appropriately. Yeah, I'll turn it back now to Ed.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Actually, I want to go back to one of your points you made earlier about how much information there is out there in the world, and dealing with that against as a sort of crisis comms, or I call it crisis comms head, but more of a communications head who obviously deals with crisis communications from time to time. Yeah, it's a sort of day of 24-hour news that we live in. Do you think that having a sort of proper social media crisis comms strategy in place is as important or perhaps more important than a traditional and broadcast media strategy? Or would you put them both in the same bracket? Think about the Suez Canal. You mentioned there that how flooded your social media channels were, yesterday when the boat release was announced, for example.
Well, I think, in this case, social media was really ablaze with it, and I do know of journalists who now go to social media to get their stories, and they run stories online as well. So I would think that, I'll put social media slightly higher than traditional media, because at the same time, you do have people who still rely on traditional media for their news, actually. So that's how I approach it. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. We've got 5 to 10 minutes left, so yeah, are you able to share how many points you got in the war game? Quickly?
I actually didn't really take part because I kind of knew the scenario, so it wouldn't be very fair of me to be able to take part in the game. Actually,
No
yeah.
problem. Well, I was interested in your answer around the question at the beginning about transparency. It said, do you want to go? I think the question was, do you go public and transparent with with what's going on, or do you hold back as much information until you know the full facts and go from there? Again, this might be very difficult to sort of judge now, but would you say it's important to go public as soon as possible to give you that, again, think about all that news out there, or hold back as much as possible? What are your
My personal
101
sense is
rules on
to I would say to go open, but at the same time, because it is a developing situation, to say that it is a developing situation, we are keeping tabs on it and we'll keep you posted. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, I think we can sort of round up. I think everyone's probably keen for lunch at some point. So, and I really want to get back to this question. I think it's a great way to finish. What is the funniest thing you've had or seen during your career in comms?
Well, the thing is, it was during my time as a PR agency person, because we had a client who wanted to do an official opening of their new premises, but they didn't want to pay so much for champagne, or catering, so they only ordered a certain number. And lo and behold, on the day itself, we were there, and then they had maybe 20% more people and not enough glasses. So we had to help wash the glasses for them as well, so that they could do a second round of toast. So my boss and I were like squatting at the sink and doing it.
The glamorous days of PR.
Yeah, exactly. The only, people always think that PR people are glamorous. We have a champagne flute in our hands, but this was not quite the image that I had thought it would be, actually.
Yeah. Fantastic. And then I was interested as well at that point where you mentioned in a previous role where you put put bits of paper together with company policy or what to say, and then put that out on people's desks. I assume that those paper, were they laminated to stop anyone writing over the top of them?
No. No, why would that be?
I don't know. I've always heard, sometimes I've heard in cases where people put out their company directives and this is it, and they make sure it's very much laminated so no one
Really?
can right over the top of it.
Well, this was not a directive per se, but it was really to update colleagues on what has been done in the last 24 hours, actually. So it was just, from what I recall, it was a series of bullet points that is always built on the previous days, actually. And we actually have very good feedback for that, because everyone is treated to their handphones and to their laptops and to their emails, and just wondering what's on earth happening. So to be able to get that physical that piece of paper to read, oh, this is what has been done, then plus leaders were giving briefings, team briefs. They just stood in a place on the floor, and then gave that 5-10 minute update. It was really good, actually.
That's fascinating. I think it's not one for now, but I know my fellow marketing communications committee members would probably love to dive into this from some more of an internal communication standpoint. I know everyone wrestles with that as much as the external and the crisis as well. It just shows getting everyone on side is almost as well, probably even more so in some cases when it comes to managing crisis. Would you say?
There's one point that I should bring up, because right now we talked a lot about external, right? This game is really about external, but don't forget that there is the important internal audience as well, actually. So in as much as you're keeping your external audiences posted, your internal people should know what you're doing as well, because you never, it's like the in the game, right? The employee says he's blowing the whistle and all that, so you need to keep your internal stakeholders, your staff, posted as to what you're doing as well. And also the thing is, if they are getting contacted by the media, or they see tweets or social media posts that are not flattering to the company, to forward that to the comms team, so that there is that integrated and aligned approach to the external world. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, I think we're going to wrap that up here, Eleanor. Thank you so much for sparing the time to take us through all of that. Yeah, really interesting insights, especially, as I said earlier, with what's going on in your world at the moment. So thank you. I know you've been very busy, so wonderful to hear from you. We've got a number of events coming up at the Chamber, I think. If we'd like to share those on screen. Let me stop from there. Fantastic. Yeah, so we've got Back to the Future. It's a webinar on 8th of April. We've also got Future Cities, Ensuring Inclusion of Invisible Disabilities on the 13th. We have an economic briefing in 2021 on the 15th of April, and AGM, of course, on the 20th of May, as well as followed up in the near future by a webinar on the 25th of May covering Shaping the Hybrid Work Future. So please dial in for those if possible. And also there will be a feedback event survey sent around to all of the attendees after this, and we'd really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes just to fill that in and give us any feedback on how you found this event and any other events that you think we should be running, and we'll take those into consideration. But thank you so much to everyone for attending. It's been great to present to you all, and yeah, have a fantastic afternoon. Thank you very much.